This is Aaron Levine, LG Insurance, with another episode of the And Insurance Podcast. A few weeks ago, we talked about workplace safety. We're taking it to a whole nother level with Joanne Farina from PuzzleHR. She's our HR professional in the room to make sure we don't do anything stupid. She's going to help you, any business owner out there that doesn't want to deal with their employees. Not really. You still have to deal with everybody because we still want to be successful and profitable and everything else in between. Joanne, thanks for swinging on today. I think this is going to be super beneficial for every business owner that's going to be listening to what we're talking about. Keep us all out of trouble. So I appreciate the conversation today. So just give me a quick, minute on what is PuzzleHR.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me.
Of course.
PuzzleHR is an organization that started about 3 years ago with the intent to help business owners really focus on HR. We don't sell payroll. We're not a PEO. For those that aren't familiar with that acronym, it's Professional Employer Organization. Mm-hmm. We don't sell any benefits or insurance. We really just want to help the organizations that contract us become more profitable and operate more efficiently and effectively.
So is the R for resources, like we think getting sent to the principal's office, or relationships, right, which is more of a more modern term in the human relationship space? Which is it for Puzzle?
So HR today is still human resources.
Okay.
But I mentioned earlier when we were out in the hall, it is relationships. So a lot of our clients typically stay with us and increase services, revise their scope of work. So there is a relationship with the client. Mm-hmm. And then there's also relationships with other industry professionals, such as yourself. On the insurance side, we partner with payroll, bankers, CPAs. So there is, with PuzzleHR, very heavily influenced relationship-based.
So you're a piece of the puzzle. I had to say it, right? Somebody's going to say it more than once, I'm sure, today, right? So an integral piece of the business life cycle and a piece of business that every employer should be thinking about, right? Because we think about hiring, firing, we dread. You're like, oh, can I have somebody else do the dirty work for me? Did you wake up one day and just say, I want to be in HR?
No. No. In fact, it was never part of the plan.
Okay.
I am an HR management consultant for PuzzleHR, and I've been in this HR outsourcing space for 15 years. But in a previous life, I was in the real estate and mortgage industry. I had received my real estate license while I was a sophomore in college. Thought it was like a big thing. I was selling...
Been there, done that.
Selling residential and commercial real estate. I had an opportunity to work for a very high-profile real estate developer. It was a small business, less than 5 employees. I had the opportunity to work directly with the CEO, the CFO, and the VP. And that by far was one of the greatest jobs I ever had. I learned so much around business acumen and what it really takes to run a small business. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was introduced to the financing aspect of real estate and entered the mortgage world, which is quite different than it is today.
Sure.
Kind of fast forward, I had a mortgage branch where I was responsible for the P&L, so basically owned my own business. Mm-hmm. And then I had an opportunity to work for Merrill Lynch as a wholesaler. And it was at that time where I was laid off because the great financial recession was on its way. It was July of 2007. Managing directors were on a conference call. In fact, I took my conference call from a BlackBerry. We really want to go back to date. And, I'm a rule follower. And the rule on that call, or the direction rather, was you're going to have to look for a job because we're definitely laying off the entire staff. And so at that time, awesome news, right? Especially being newly married.
So were they HR compliant in their...
That's a great question. I didn't give it too much thought.
Right.
But I will say, at the time, it didn't even dawn on me. It was just one of those things like I got to find a new job.
Right.
And a recruiter reached out to me and said, hey, there's this great HR outsourcing position. I think you'd be a really good fit for it. At the time, I had an undergrad in business economics. And, human resources, labor, wages, it's all part of the big picture. And I thought it would be a temporary fix for 12 months. But what I realized during that 12-month period is that I really enjoyed working with business owners.
Right. So, I mean, there's so much going on in today's world when it comes to human resources, workplace safety, the relationships, right? We're in a big people going back to the office spot right now, right? I hear about it all over the place.
Right.
I hear that people are moonlighting and having more than one full-time job while they're working remotely from home.
Right.
Like my staff works mostly from home, and it's great because, I get to work from home too and, not be accountable to my whereabouts. But that's another story for another day. But so what's going on with this pullback to the office? Are the employers or the businesses going to get away with it? Like, is it all going to just happen? Like, I'm forcing you. I don't care if you move to Florida, you're coming back to Lower Manhattan and going to the office. Like, how's that all going to shake out?
So that's a loaded question.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of businesses where remote work, hybrid work is just not going to work, right? You think of retail, restaurants, hospitality. You need humans. You need people there on site to get the job done.
And robots.
And robots. We are going to see, I believe, a lot of robots start to come into the workplace.
So I did an interview. I was down in Cherry Hill with Advanced Hospitality Systems, did an interview down there, and they're big in the robot space for hospitality, right? They have front of house robots, back of house robots. There's just robots that are taking over some of these jobs, and they show up to work. All you have to do is make sure that the battery's charged.
Yeah.
They don't talk back unless something goes wrong with the software or, programming error. But I mean,
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. A couple of years before COVID, I was speaking with a business owner who owns a restaurant in Montclair, and he was already looking at implementing the robots into his space because it's really hard to find good people. Turnover is a situation within a business that really equates to dollars and cents.
right.
So, I do think that robots are going to make more of a presence in business as we move forward. But to answer your question, can an employee move down to Florida and then the employer, mandate that they come back? They can, but if they're going to get that employee is a whole nother question. I think, there's a lot of benefits from working from home or having like a hybrid situation. And so if the business can make it work for the employees and the employees can make it work for the employer, why not?
Right.
But every business is different.
It's, we lose collaboration, we lose camaraderie when everybody's working from home. There's a lot of time lost, I think, right? That shrinkage from working from home of time, so to speak. But I feel also you can get the same amount of work done in 6 to 8 hours than you would normally have gotten done by leaving your house at 6 a.m. and getting home at 8 p.m., right? That 14-hour day that had 3 hours of commute associated with it, plus a 90-minute lunch tied in there, right? You shrink that all down, get rid of the fluff, you have a 6-hour workday.
Absolutely.
So there's definitely some benefits on both sides of the spectrum. So
Yeah,
are you dealing with this and with any of your clients right now?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to add, there are, for the first time ever, 5 generations in the workplace. And so the Gen Z and the millennials are more and they're ambitious. I think they get a bad rap from time to time, but they want to focus more on the outcome as opposed to, the input. They don't want to just check the box and work 40 hours, 9 to 5 to say that they got the same results done, to your point, that they can get, 4 to 6 hours, a day. The baby boomers and some of the older, Gen X, we're kind of a little bit more, we'll go with the flow, but we maybe want that 30 minutes space time in the office, whereas the other generations don't.
Sure.
So a lot of projects that clients ask us to help them with is to help better identify, is a 4-day work week better in the office with maybe 2 days remote, 2 days in, maybe 3 days. There's a lot of, different variables and hypotheticals that we can look at.
I love the 4-day work week idea. I just don't know how I could ever implement it, right? We're in a customer service business. Insurance is a customer service. I should have a 6-day work week, but I don't, right? I'm like, how do I get this shrunken down to 4 days? It just means I'm going to work more because I'm always working anyway. But how are companies implementing this 4-day work week?
So we start with an employee engagement survey.
Okay.
So for example, I have a client that was referred to me by an insurance broker. They're very interested in the 4-day work week because they think that's what the employees want.
Okay.
And so what we suggested we start with is having an employee engagement survey distributed to the entire team, and then get those results to see if that pinpoint, look at the data.
Right.
Data is at the heart of everything. To really determine, is this going to make sense? Is this going to resolve the problems that we're having with turnover? Is this going to resolve the problems that we're having with engagement? Or is it just going to give them another day off and production continues to go down?
That's interesting. And, a survey, that's a good way to get it started, but you don't really know until you implement, right? Like,
you don't. And, in your business, service, if somebody calls in on a Friday, they expect somebody to pick up the phone and give them an answer.
Right.
So maybe it wouldn't work for your business, but we can certainly take a look at what would work.
Sure.
And how can we offer those flexibility options that your employees are looking for.
Right. All right.
While
So
continuing to run the business.
let's get out of this fun stuff. Like, let's go down to basics, right? Some of the basic functionalities that every business should have in place, right? We need an employee handbook. We need an operations manual. We need rules, right, around hiring, firing, employee reviews. I haven't done a good employee review in a long time. I'm spilling all the dirt. I don't care. It is what it is. But these are things that you implement for employers and help them manage. You don't do payroll yourself, but you can help manage the payroll system that somebody's doing. So dive into some of this other stuff, some of the basics that employers might and should really need help with.
Yeah. So I think there's a misconception that small businesses do not have to comply with labor law because they're small. And here in New Jersey,
They don't even buy in workers' comp when they're supposed to, but.
Yeah, I've ran into those situations too. But that can't be farther from the truth.
Right.
New Jersey is a very employee-friendly state. And so compliance is certainly part of the conversations that I'm having with business owners and their management team. But we can do it, but we're focusing more on the strategic, transformative side of the business because so much has gone on since COVID. But definitely every employer should have an employee handbook that outlines, what they expect of their employees and what they can expect of them. Do they have unlimited vacation time? Do they have 5 days sick time as just to align with the New Jersey sick rule?
Right.
When are they eligible for benefits? So they really should have something that protects them. They should have job descriptions clearly outlining what's expected of their duties, and then performance and management in evaluation. One thing that New Jersey has is the Equal Pay Act, where you're required to have these documents and you're required to, on an annual basis, go through the review. It doesn't mean that an employee is going to get a raise.
Right.
So for all the employers out there listening, it's just a tool to make sure it's a good check-in. This is what you're doing well. Here are your strengths and weaknesses. How can we help and support you? Because employees really want to work for a company where they feel valued. And so if you're not having those regular check-ins, performance evaluation conversations, that employee is at risk.
Right. So it's funny. One of the books I'm reading right now, it says that employees quit managers more than they quit their actual job, right? So they're more leaving a culture that's toxic and a manager that's toxic as opposed to because of their job function or anything else. So, right, this whole relationship thing that goes into it, but having those rules around it and that performance evaluation is a critical tool, at the middle level, even for small businesses, for people to regain that traction and understanding that, the employee-employer relationship and what everybody's roles and responsibilities are.
Yeah. Well, if you think about what happened during the Great Resignation, more folks that were on the verge of retirement but just not there yet also left the workplace. And those are the individuals that had most of the skill and knowledge, institutional knowledge. And so those middle managers kind of got bumped up. And then the lower entry level managers got bumped up. So you have people at the bottom that aren't equipped, in terms of, management. And so it's very easy for people today to leave their managers because they're not trained properly. So a lot of the work that we do at PuzzleHR is working with teams on leadership development.
Oh, fun. Okay.
Yeah, emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, level setting, and being able to come from a place of empathy when you're speaking to your employees about what's expected of them.
I'm like taking all these mental notes right now. But the emotional intelligence thing, the Chris Voss hostage negotiation leadership stuff is all cool. Black Swan Group is definitely on top of a lot of it.
And it's also cool for our personal relationships, right? Just makes us better humans overall.
Yeah. So the Black Swan, they have some workshops that they do, and I'm like, I've always wanted to go. They're expensive, but I'm like, there's one in New York in October, and I never pulled the trigger, and I think it's sold out already. So I just got to get on the next one, because I think a full day of immersing myself in that emotional intelligence and the HNL stuff would be super cool. And it's, just to better connect with my staff, my people, my children, whatever it may be. So,
well, big shout out to Carla Verdi, our VP of Leadership and Development. She is phenomenal. So
awesome.
She can come to you. You don't have to go to New York.
Let's do it. I think that'd be awesome. I think that'd just be a cool workshop to put on locally and invite some business owners. I don't know. Maybe it's something that we can work on. Collaborate.
Would love it. Yeah.
So tell me a fun story. Like, give me something juicy right now. Come on. It has to come out. We need something good. Give me a good firing story or a good hiring story. And then,
Well, I mentioned before that I was a branch manager and I was responsible for the P&L. And I think what is cool about this story for today's conversation is to highlight all the things that I did wrong.
Perfect.
Before I knew better.
Throw yourself under the bus.
I'm going to throw myself under the bus because I can relate. And I think that's where I add value when I'm talking to business owners because I've been in that seat. And, I leaned on other individuals, owners of this mortgage bank. You can't have a franchise. So there's like a branch manager, agreement. But I leaned on them and I got incorrect information. I leaned on an insurance broker at the time and I got incorrect information. And what led me to asking them for, some additional support and ideas was that I had an employee who would just religiously show up late. Loan officers, we probably had about 10 at the time.
Right.
And there's always one in the bunch. And this happened to be him. And he's, maybe scheduled to come in at 10 o'clock and 5 after 10. No, so-and-so, I'm not going to mention names. 10 after 10, no, so-and-so. 20 after 10, I get a phone call. I'm going to come in late. Well, that would have been great to get that call 20 minutes before 10. Just, next time, a little bit of appreciation.
Can't show up at 10 o'clock? I mean, something's going on there.
Something's going on. But this particular day, the loan officers that were there on time doing their work were now distracted because they were laughing and cracking jokes that so-and-so is going to be late again.
Right.
And having no HR experience at this time, I lost my cool. My fuse was lit. He came in probably closer to 11. I pulled like a Donald Trump, like, you're fired.
Yes, that's awesome.
And that was also before The Apprentice, so we're really going back. But what I learned in that process is that I didn't handle it with a cool head.
Right.
I didn't have any documentation that he was religiously late. And we offered medical insurance at the time. And I called my insurance broker to figure out what do I need to do to offboard him. And I was told nothing. You're less than 20 employees because COBRA, which is an employment law, protects businesses with 20 employees or more to extend coverage. Well, fast forward to 2008 in the winter when I'm going through an extensive employment law class to get certified in HR. They said that in New Jersey, there's a mini COBRA law. And it completely blew my mind.
Right.
And I zoned out for a couple of minutes because I was thinking, wow, that could have went really wrong. Like, I did a lot wrong in that process. But imagine if that individual had gotten hurt in a car accident, one of his dependents got hurt. What's the first thing they do?
Sure.
They go to an attorney. They want to know what their rights are. Attorney's going to ask if they have insurance. I was just let go. They're going to come asking Joanne, did you fill out the COBRA, paperwork? Did you get it initiated?
Right.
And no, I didn't. I would have been responsible for medical bills. It just could have been a complete game changer.
Sure.
And so I share that story because oftentimes business owners just don't know what they don't know. And they think because it's their business, they're protected.
It's terrible being a business owner. I mean, flat out, there's a lot of downside to it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many other, unique kind of crazy stories, which probably is not appropriate for this podcast. We can talk about that over lunch one day. But yeah, I mean, just not knowing can really get a business in trouble.
So one of the things that we do, we like to share, we use a service called Mineral. John Johnson was on the podcast. We were talking workplace safety, but we share that resource, that tool for employers to be able to set up an employee handbook. Most of them don't. And then it also gives them that hotline, right? So, but you guys act as a strategic partner also. It's like, hey, before I do something stupid, Joanne, what's the right thing to do? I think is one of the most important pieces of the boat. That, having that 1-800 number, or having your cell phone, or having somebody in the office at Puzzle to reach out to before taking any action with an employee, because it's so litigious out there. We promote and want everybody, every business to have an employment practices liability insurance policy, a proper handbook, right? I have a big meeting in the city next week. And a lot of my conversation is going to be about, okay, do you have your employee handbook? Or you have your operations? Do you have everything that you need set up appropriately before we even talk about insurance? Like, we want to make sure that things are set up in the operations, and then we'll go into the insurance. Because if you have a lot of gaps on this side, there's going to be issues on the insurance side, and then you're going to think it's my fault. So we always try to get things covered. And then we obviously want to make sure that people have their employment practices liability, because the lawsuits are coming in. We're seeing them. It's not fun. It's not friendly. A lot of the times they are BS, but it doesn't matter. As an employer, you still have a duty to defend. And that duty to defend can get expensive. So we try to offset some of the things and get people to use professionals wherever a professional is fit. I'm not filing payroll taxes on my own, right? We use a payroll company to make sure that our payroll taxes get filed. We use a CPA and an accountant to make sure that our income taxes and our annuals and our quarterlies and everything else gets filed. My job is to create content and generate revenue for my business.
Yeah.
It is not doing anything else, but I'm not going to be an asshole to my employees. Looking at you. We're just going to make sure that everything goes well. And if then I have an issue, I have a professional that I can reach out to. And I've probably said that on so many different shows, of having the right professionals in your corner is critical to running and operating a great business, because then you can just focus on what you do best, whether you're a restaurant, a retail store, a professional service, whatever it is. I think it's super, super important. So what size companies do you typically work with, right? So a lot of this conversation will be like, oh, too expensive. But, do you work with small businesses also?
We work primarily with small and mid-sized companies. I think, regardless if a client has 5 employees or 500, there's some type of support that we can certainly provide. It's just a matter of, do they have the budget?
Right.
And are they forward thinking in the sense where they know they have to do things differently in order to compete?
So doing things differently in order to compete, right? That's important, right? How do you have that culture? But when it comes to recruiting and sharing that recruiting story, do you guys help with the recruiting effort as well? Because that's a struggle that I'm hearing more and more every day, is people cannot find good talent. You mentioned the great resignation. So many people left the workforce, right? I know so many people that are looking for talent and are having a difficult time finding that talent. Does Puzzle help in that effort?
Yeah, it's like, where did all the people go?
Where did all the people go?
And our unemployment rate is at 3.7.
Right.
There's still 2 jobs for every 1 person that's searching. And, from a turnover standpoint, it used to be somewhere around 12, 13% would be the average. We're now hovering around 25%.
That's wild.
It's really wild. A lot has changed. I think to answer the question, yes, we would help with hiring. Couple of different avenues to go about doing that. But what's really important when we are helping businesses with hiring is making sure that their job posting is clear and concise. It's going to attract the individuals that are going to be able to meet and exceed in that role.
Right.
Where does it get posted? And then speed to lead, because there are so many people looking for employment. If you have just one person in HR handling recruiting, interviewing, compliance, payroll, benefits administration, I mean, there's just so many hours in the day.
Right.
An individual who applied to that business on Monday, if they're not getting a call on Tuesday, Wednesday, the latest, they're already on to the next job. So where we're helping clients with the hiring is really making that process tight and efficient and taking it off their plate so that they continue, just concentrating on revenue generating items that are going to support the business.
So many thoughts going through my head right now, but from recruiting, hiring, firing, discipline, compliance. I mean, there's so many different pieces to
The puzzle.
this human resources puzzle, as she so says it, as we are leading up to a close. Joanne, thanks so much for sitting with me. There's a lot to think about. Business owners, Joanne's information is going to be somewhere in the subtext. If you have questions, just reach out and we'll make sure you get connected and get your puzzle put together. Talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Aaron.